How a Western salary quietly limits your financial thinking. By fixed income removes chaos. It creates routine. It makes life feel manageable. But what rarely gets examined is how quietly that same salary begins to shape not just your lifestyle, but the way your brain thinks about money, time, and possibility. That's why this video isn't titled, "How a Salary Ruins Your Finances," or "How a Job Traps You." It's titled, "How a Western Salary Quietly Limits Your Financial Thinking," because nothing about this process feels dramatic. Nothing triggers alarm. It feels normal, even healthy. And that's exactly why it works. In Western financial systems, money arrives on schedule. Bills leave automatically. Spending is frictionless. Financial life starts to feel handled. And when systems handle things for us, the brain stops questioning them. This is where the limitation begins. Not loudly, not aggressively, but through repetition. When income arrives every 2 weeks or every month, the brain slowly stops thinking in long horizons and starts thinking in cycles. Rent cycle, payment cycle, subscription cycle, bonus cycle. Over time, these cycles become invisible boundaries. Not boundaries you choose, boundaries your brain adapts to. Because the brain always adapts to the structure it repeats the most. And a salaried structure repeats one core lesson again and again. Exchange time for certainty. Trade flexibility for predictability. Avoid what feels uncertain. Emotionally, this doesn't register as fear. It registers as comfort, relief, adulthood, which is why many people don't notice the limitation at first. They're earning more than they used to. They're more stable than before. They're doing everything right. Yet something feels narrow. Goals feel conservative. Decisions feel safe but uninspiring. The future feels organized, but strangely small. This is the quiet recognition moment. Not panic, not regret, just a subtle awareness that comfort may be shaping more than it's protecting. And this is where the title and thumbnail matter. They shouldn't show collapse, or fear, or chaos. They should show something familiar but enclosing. A repeating calendar, a straight line, a brain inside a neat box. Because the viewer isn't clicking out of fear. They're clicking because it feels accurate, because they sense that the salary didn't just pay their bills. It trained their expectations. It narrowed their time horizon. It taught their brain to prioritize predictability over possibility. And once that realization lands, the question naturally changes. Not, how do I earn more? But, what exactly has my salary trained me to believe about money? And once that question forms, the viewer stays. Because now the video isn't about finance anymore. It's about understanding themselves. To understand how a Western salary limits financial thinking, we need to look at how the problem shows up in real life, not as theory, but as patterns people live inside every day. Consider a common situation. Someone gets a raise, not a dramatic one, just enough to feel like progress. The first reaction isn't long-term planning. It's relief. The brain says, things are easier now. And because the pressure eases, thinking slows. Maybe the apartment gets a little nicer. Maybe the car payment increases slightly. Maybe a few subscriptions are added. Because they feel affordable now. None of these decisions feel irresponsible. Each one feels earned. But notice what's happening psychologically. The salary increase doesn't expand thinking. It stabilizes it. The brain recalibrates comfort instead of recalibrating strategy. This is the first quiet limitation. In Western systems, most financial feedback is delayed or hidden. When you use a credit card, you don't feel the loss. When you subscribe to something, you don't feel the accumulation. When expenses rise slowly, they don't register as danger. So the brain assumes balance, even when flexibility is shrinking. Another example, many salaried professionals say they feel too busy to think seriously about money, not because they're careless, but because their financial life feels automated. Paycheck comes in, bills go out, savings happen maybe. The brain concludes, this is handled. And once something feels handled, it no longer receives attention. This is critical because wealth building requires active thinking across long time horizons. But salary life trains the opposite. It trains short-term optimization. monthly performance, quarterly goals, annual reviews. Even ambition becomes scheduled. The future gets compressed into manageable intervals, and anything that doesn't fit into those intervals feels abstract, risky, optional, or something I'll look into later. This is why many people feel mentally blocked. When they think about non-salary income, long-term investing, or structural change, it's not fear of losing money, it's unfamiliarity. The brain hasn't been trained to think outside predictable exchange. Another subtle example. In many Western workplaces, stability is rewarded more than adaptability. Consistency is praised. Volatility is discouraged. So the brain learns a deeper lesson. Predictability equals safety. Uncertainty equals threat. That lesson doesn't stay at work. It follows people home. It shapes how they view money, opportunity, and even their own capacity. This is why people often say, "I could never do something like that." Not because they lack ability, but because their mental reference points have narrowed. And here's the most important part. None of this feels like failure. That's why it's so difficult to notice. Life works, bills are paid, progress exists, but the financial imagination shrinks quietly. And emotionally, this creates a specific feeling. Not panic, not despair, but a low-level tension. A sense that something is capped. That growth feels procedural, not expansive. People often misinterpret this feeling. They think they need more income, or a better job, or a different company. But the real issue isn't the salary itself. It's the way repeated predictability reshapes how the brain evaluates possibility. The salary doesn't trap people financially. It narrows their default assumptions. And once assumptions narrow, choices narrow with them. This is the problem at the center of modern Western financial life. Not poverty, not ignorance, but conditioning. Once you clearly see the problem, the solution becomes less dramatic than most people expect. This isn't about quitting your job. It isn't about chasing risk. And it definitely isn't about forcing discipline. Because discipline is fragile. The real solution begins with understanding that the brain doesn't respond well to effort, but it responds very well to structure. A Western salary limits financial thinking because it reduces uncertainty and increases predictability. So the answer isn't to remove predictability entirely. It's to stop letting predictability be the only structure your brain experiences. This is where most people go wrong. They try to think bigger, inside the same mental environment. But the brain doesn't change through intention. It changes through exposure. So the first shift is not behavioral. It's cognitive. You begin by separating income from identity. A salary is a tool, not a definition of capacity, not a measure of intelligence, not a boundary of possibility. Once that distinction becomes clear, thinking loosens. The second shift is temporal. Salary thinking trains the brain to focus on short cycles. So the solution is to deliberately introduce longer, quieter time horizons, not by tracking every detail, but by anchoring attention to outcomes that are slow and unspectacular. This reduces the brain's discomfort with delay. The third shift is environmental. Instead of relying on willpower, you redesign friction. You make impulsive decisions harder and long-term decisions quieter. Not dramatic, not extreme, just subtle changes that reduce cognitive load. This is important because wealth-friendly behavior doesn't emerge from intensity. It emerges from mental calm. When the brain stops constantly reacting to short-term signals, it becomes capable of abstraction again. And abstraction is where strategic thinking lives. This is the part people often miss. The goal isn't to escape salary life. The goal is to prevent salary life from becoming the only mental reference point. When multiple reference points exist, the brain regains flexibility. Options feel real again. Time feels expandable again. Possibility stops feeling vague. And this is where financial stress begins to dissolve. Not because circumstances change overnight, but because interpretation changes. The pressure you felt before starts to make sense. It was never about doing more. It was about seeing more. And that's the core idea behind this entire video. Modern financial frustration is rarely about laziness or ignorance. It's about cognitive narrowing. Inside systems designed for convenience. Once you understand that, you stop blaming yourself and start questioning structures. That's what this channel exists for. Not to tell you what to do, but to help you see what's shaping you. If this video gave language to something you felt but never articulated, that's not coincidence. That's the beginning of clarity. This is Mindvantic. We don't chase noise, we study patterns. And if you want to keep understanding how psychology quietly shapes money, decision-making, and modern life, then this is where you belong.